Hey, Bankless Nation. Welcome to this community Ask Me Anything. We have the founder of Rye from Reflexer Labs created a really interesting stablecoin, or is it a crypto dollar? We will get into the terms and definitions in this community Ask Me Anything. The first time around, we had some technical difficulty with the live stream, so hope you're hanging in there. If not, this recording will be available on YouTube. And of course, as always, on the podcast, get your questions in on YouTube. We will put them in queue and try to fit them into the show. David, you ready for this?
Absolutely. This is a really cool project, and I think really in the spirit of this week, because this is Coinbase week, and this is the week that crypto breaks into the NASDAQ. And we are slowly infiltrating the rest of the world, pulling them into the world of crypto. And then once you're in the world of crypto, we have this brand new project called Reflexer and Rye, which is a self-sovereign stablecoin. Not a crypto dollar, but a stable coin. And so we're really pioneering in all different directions. And once you come into the fold, we have this system that allows you to be self-sovereign without having to rely on the Fed without having to rely on banks. And so I think this is, while Coinbase is making a big splash on the legacy markets, we have on the other side of things, when you go into the rabbit hole, we have these tools that can allow you to just completely remove yourself. So these bridges from the legacy world into completely self-sovereign finance are getting really, really strong. And the end destination is also getting really, really strong. And that end destination to me is something like this project that we're going to talk about today, which is Reflexer and Rye.
Yes. So we are doing this because these types of algorithmic stablecoins are a big deal. But what's an even bigger deal is that this is a self-sovereign, completely bankless attempt at some sort of stability asset, stability mechanism for crypto. That means it's purely crypto native, no meat space dependency. It is truly in code we trust, and therefore hits very much the bankless thesis of creating a self-sovereign, independent global money system for the world. It's still an experiment, but as David said, we are deep down the rabbit hole. So we are trying to figure out what this experiment might yield and what others like it might yield. One quick disclaimer, I love the vision for this project so much. I am actually an investor. And I hope that this project is successful, but if not, Reflexer and Rye, some other project like it really fits the spirit of going bankless and why we're doing it. David, anything else to add before we get in with Stefan and dive into the community Ask Me Anything?
Yeah, Amin Soleimani, who's been working with the Reflexer team, coined this term money gods. And the money god comes from just the fact that we can build something that is out of our control, and it in fact controls us. And this is why Bitcoin is so powerful, right? Bitcoin is not something that can be steered by any one or few humans. It is something that just exists, and either we can accept that and integrate with it, or we can fight it. But generally, people who fight Bitcoin lose. Now, the Ethereum app layer, I think, allows that same sort of money godness, right? Like we can build applications that control us that we cannot control. And I think that's really a big through line that we're going to have with this conversation with Stefan, and overall the through line for why the Ethereum app layer is so cool. And so to me, it's really, really exciting to see applications like Reflex or like Rye come into existence that really resonate with the money god ethos or money god thesis about why crypto is so cool.
All right, guys, before we get into this conversation with Stefan that I know you're going to enjoy, we want to thank the sponsors that made this episode possible. MetaMask is your go-to wallet for the bankless journey. If you're going bankless, you need MetaMask, period. Browser and mobile, get them both. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi. Here's my favorite part. Now you can swap tokens directly in MetaMask with a single swipe. This has got to be the easiest way to trade Ethereum tokens. Choose a token you own, a token to exchange it with, and get your quotes. If you like what you see, you hit swap. That's it. What makes swaps so useful is what happens behind the scenes. It compares DEXs, aggregators, and market makers to find you the best price with the lowest network fees and the least slippage. This means you can swap a wider range of tokens, and swaps can even automatically split up your trade to give you access to better liquidity. You don't even have to think about it. Try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop or mobile now at metamask.io and start swapping.
Bankless is proud to be supported by UNISWAP. UNISWAP is a new paradigm in asset exchange infrastructure. Instead of a cumbersome order book system where trades are matched with other humans, UNISWAP is an autonomous piece of software on Ethereum, which is what Ryan and I call a money robot. No human counterparties or centralized intermediaries, just autonomous code on Ethereum. Input the token you want to sell and receive the token you want to buy. Something brand new in the Uniswap ecosystem is the Uniswap Grants program is now accepting applications for grants. We have been saying this for a while and we'll say it again. DAOs have money and they are in need of labor. If you think that you have something to contribute to the Uniswap DAO, apply for a grant to Uniswap. Just look at the size of the Uniswap treasury. It's almost $3 billion. This mountain of capital is looking for labor. Do you have something of value to contribute to the Uniswap DAO? No matter how big or small your idea is, you can apply for a uni grant at unigrants.org and help steer Uniswap in the direction that you think it should go. That's exactly what we did to get Uniswap to be a sponsor for Bankless, and you can do the same for your project. Thank you, Uniswap, for sponsoring Bankless.
All right, everyone, we are tuning into this Ask Me Anything with Stefan Ionescu. He is on the founding team of Reflexer Labs. He's also a brilliant engineer. This is the team behind the asset called Rye, which is going to be the topic of today's Community Ask Me Anything. Of course, as usual, get your questions in on YouTube. We will answer those. But the first section is for David and I to actually ask some questions. We get to be greedy. And Stefan, it's great to have you. Welcome to Bankless.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Do you know, I really want to start with the high level for folks here, Stefan. Sure. And a high level, I guess the question is sort of open-ended. What problem do you think Rye is solving?
Right. So Rye is trying to solve some shortcomings in the kind of usual mechanisms that you see around kind of creating pegged coins, as they call them, or crypto dollars, as the Bankless Nation calls them. It's mainly the fact that you need, like, we saw kind of a problem with DAI last year in 2020 during Black Thursday, where they kind of struggled to keep DAI close to the peg. Like DAI went way above the peg at some point, and they had to do something to bring it back. And the thing that they could have done was to depeg DAI, so not have it pegged anything, and manage to impose negative interest rates on their holders. So kind of anyone who held DAI was kind of subject to a negative rate that was draining value from them. And that would have made them sell and bring DAI back to the target price, or kind of the peg, as they call it. So we're basically trying to solve problems that are kind of more technical in nature in the pegged coin or stablecoin area.
As I recall, Stefan, this was actually contemplated in some of the discussions in the original DAI design, actually. Yep. I forget what it's called, TFRM, something like that, some sort of target
TRFM,
reference rate. Okay.
Target rate feedback mechanism.
Yeah. So like what's interesting to me is David and I have made this comment almost on every episode, it feels like, but like the what we're seeing is every experiment in crypto and in DeFi that can be tried will be tried, right? And so DAI went in its own direction on a number of fronts. They went multi-collateral, they went a bit more governance driven in terms of their stability design rather than algorithmic. Yep. And they don't have the ability to do these negative rates. And so is Rye sort of a reaction to that? Is it sort of taking some of these concepts and the road that was not traveled by DAI and implementing them?
It is. On the one hand, I wanted to build this simply to show that the initial maker team was right, and that it is possible to have an asset that's stable and yet not pegged anything. And it is possible to have negative rates in crypto. So it was more like curiosity for me to see if it can be done and then see how people might use that. So, and I kind of knew about Maker because prior to kind of starting to talk with Amin, who's in our founding team, and kind of getting to kind of know him, and Nikolai, who also used to work at Maker, I kind of studied Maker for about 6 months. I just did kind of research on stablecoins, and I knew about the purple paper, and I knew that they didn't implement TRFM before.
The other, I think, problem that, at least in my mind, this solves. So you're taking this in a different direction, maybe looking to get a better stability mechanism out of it. But like the big crypto vision, right, is to have a money system that can operate independently of meat space. And
Right.
what is meat space, right? Meat space is obviously, commercial banking, but it's also meat space is central banking. Meat space is also nation state governments. I know Amin in his article that David you referenced calls this an independent state global reserve asset and unit of account, independent of the state. This has been part of the crypto vision, and we have independent monetary units in the form of Bitcoin, in the form of Ether today, but these units are not stable. Can you talk about the, I guess, your thoughts on that? Is that part of what Rye is trying to solve as well?
Yeah, that's the idea. So we shouldn't like crypto in general. I don't think crypto should fully depend on the dollar or specifically on any monetary policy that's external from the chain. So we should have a unit of account that just depends on like it just lives on a blockchain and you can just trust it and it's stable and you can transact with it. So that's kind of the idea, like not depend on the Fed to dictate what happens to what I hold. So yeah, it's pretty much kind of the original crypto vision in a way.
So, Stefan, I want to take people to school a little bit here because, so someone made the comment I saw on Twitter. It's like, you have to be full time into DeFi and crypto to actually like understand what's going on. And I feel like that's especially true of sectors that are like doing a tremendous amount of innovation. So new
Right.
projects are coming out in sort of the crypto dollar stablecoin sector all of the time. And it's very difficult for people to come up with. You've got these new acronyms like FE and, FRAX and what is all of this stuff? So let's take people to school. I want some kind of an orientation here to help ground the rest of this conversation. So I think of a few buckets as far as I'm going to generically call them stable coins, though I know David wants to have a semantic discussion about what stablecoin actually is.
Right.
We'll get to that. But let's start with the first bucket, and I think that's important. And this is stable coins that are, on the one hand, dollar pegged versus stable coins, on the other hand, that are not pegged to the dollar as a unit of account. Can you talk us through that? So which side does Rye fall on versus other projects, and why?
So as far as I know, Rye is the only stable asset for now that's not pegged to anything. So it's not pegged to the dollar, it's not pegged to euro or to rather anything. It just has like starting price. It starts at like let's say we started at $3.14. That was like pi was our initial target. And from that point, like Rye and the system behind it reprices itself. So it changes the target, it changes kind of the peg where Rye should always come down or up to, or it should always come back to.
And
So
just
it
to
doesn't
just to
really
be clear, you guys picked 3.14 because you needed a number to start, and you
Yep.
guys just picked pi because why not? And so the only reason why you picked pi was because you needed a number, but there's no formal relationship between Rye and pi moving forward. It just was the starting number, and now it's in the past, and now it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. So we could have started at $100, 1,000, 10,000. It doesn't really matter. It works the same. It's just maybe
And
the human perception. Like you can start really high or really, really low. It's just that.
I'm going to share a screenshot here, and this is from the folks at Masari that sort of shows this in the context of the possibility trinity and stable coins, right? So what we have on the right is kind of this non-pegged stable coin. This is maybe where Rye fits, and this is different than all of the dollar pegged stable coins that exist today. So there are different really trade-offs here, right? But this is similar to like a non-pegged dollar stablecoin is really similar to a currency of a sovereign nation, right? So like the yen, for instance, it trades against the dollar, but it is not in any way pegged to the dollar, right? And so they have to almost bootstrap that demand for a new unit of account. Any just comments in general on some of the trade-offs that you guys are making with the impossibility trinity in having something that is non-pegged to the dollar?
Yeah, I would say the main advantage in a way is full discretion over setting your own monetary policy. So the system can choose exactly what interest rates it wants. It can choose exactly when it wants to attract capital or repel capital. So you have more flexibility on, in general, to change kind of your monetary policy as opposed to pegged coins.
So the peg coins, though, they've gone in this direction because I think they've wanted to bootstrap their unit of account demand, right? Because everybody uses the dollar. We all know what the dollar is. RAI is an entirely different unit of account, essentially. And people aren't yet familiar with it. Is that some of the trade-off here, that you're not able to bootstrap and say, yeah, you know what one RAI is worth because it's always like $1 or flexes around that rate. Can you talk about that trade-off?
Right, that's a trade-off in terms of kind of integrating RAI in the ecosystem. People don't yet kind of understand how can something be stable and kind of float. And I'm like, well, you can look at the euro, how it floats against the dollar, or as you said, yen or any other currency. So for now, it's kind of education is the hard part, and kind of telling people that this is stable without just referencing something external to it is the tough part.
All right, guys. So that's lesson one: dollar pegged versus non-dollar pegged. RAI is non-dollar pegged. Let's talk about another bucket that I think in stable coins in terms of collateralized on the one side versus uncollateralized on the other. What is collateralized versus uncollateralized, and which is RAI?
So RAI is exactly like DAI, it's over collateralized. It's right now the minimum C ratio, collateralization ratio in RAI is 145%. That's for ETH. So you can put ETH in the system and mint RAI until your position goes to that minimum collateralization ratio. And below that, you get liquidated again, exactly like in Maker or DAI. Kind of under collateralized stablecoins are the ones that try to go kind of below 100% backing with collateral, or even to zero, and they try to maintain stability with a different mechanism that's not.
Oh, now we lost both camera and audio. One moment, guys, while we wait for Stefan to come back.
Maybe internet connection issue this time. We're not having good luck technically.
No, oh, he's totally gone. He's totally gone. All right, well, so what he was saying is that RAI is collateralized just like DAI. And so it's very similar to a CDP mechanism. So you submit Ether and then you can mint RAI, but you can only mint a lesser value of RAI than what you collateralize. And I actually don't know those parameterization ratios at the top of my head. Probably something around 150%, Ryan, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but 150% seems like the magic number for DAI, and so I think a lot of collateralized stablecoins have sort of adopted that.
There we go. Stefan, okay, so we lost you real quick, and so we were kind of filling in the gaps. We talked about how RAI is very similar to a CDP, where you stick in your ETH, you collateralize your ETH, and then you mint RAI, just like how you mint DAI. But what's the parameterization ratio for Ether and RAI? Like, is 150%? What's that number?
It's 145%, so it's a bit lower than the usual one in Maker.
Can we talk about some of the trade-offs, right? So collateralized, an example of that is RAI, an example of that is DAI. Uncollateralized, an example of that is maybe FIAT. I'm not sure. What are some examples out there? Maybe empty set dollar, maybe the original basis cash design would be examples of these things. So what are the trade-offs on collateralized versus uncollateralized? It seems like one of the trade-offs has got to be, well, with collateralized you've got something backing it so there's like a bottom level of value that the thing can sink to, and uncollateralized there's like nothing backing it. But how do these trade-offs appear to users?
So when you have something backing your coin or stablecoin, people tend to trust that a bit more. Like we saw in practice that basis doesn't really work. Like there's always a bank run. People just sell that until it goes to almost zero. So it doesn't really work. You need something kind of instill credibility to other people. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Okay, as long as we are taking folks to school, then we've covered two: collateralized, uncollateralized, dollar pegged versus non-dollar pegged. RAI is non-dollar pegged, collateralized. Let's talk about this other area that I think is important, which is governed stability versus something that's more algorithmic. And what I mean by that is, the stability mechanism, the like interest rates for a CDP in Maker are determined by Maker governance, those that own the MKR holder. That's not the case with RAI. RAI is maybe more algorithmic stability on that side of the spectrum. These are my own terms, but you tell me, like, what's RAI, and how do you minimize governance? How is that different?
Yeah, so RAI is a bit different compared to DAI because we also have stability fees for every collateral type that's in the system. But in our case, stability fees are more or less fixed or bounded. They kind of price the risk that an asset brings to the protocol. So for example, we can price kind of the risk for Ether at 2% interest per year. So when you open a position, you need to pay kind of 2% interest per year to keep it open. We have something else that's used for stability to actually stabilize RAI. And that lever is called the redemption rate. That thing is a number in a smart contract that every second is multiplied by the current moving peg that RAI has, and it results in a new moving peg for RAI. So if the moving peg for RAI right now is, let's say, $3, that number in 1 second from now, that number will be multiplied by that current peg, and it will result in a new peg. And that's how kind of the redemption rate changes the moving peg that RAI has. And by changing the peg, it kind of imposes either a negative or a positive interest rate on holders. Because the idea is that when the moving peg goes up, we have a positive interest rate. So you kind of earn something by holding RAI. And when there's a negative interest rate, you lose value by holding RAI.
So this minimizes governance. And why is governance minimization important for self-sovereign money?
We at Reflexer generally believe that human discretion will be the main thing that will make an asset unstable in the future. So human discretion in general means that anyone can come, they can impose their will on the majority of the people, and they can say, I want this thing to work like X, even if it's suboptimal. So we think that the ideal way to build this stable asset is to just put the system in charge, put an algorithm in charge, and let it work.
Yeah, in a way, this is a very Austrian idea. It's a very like Bitcoiner idea. It's a very Hayek idea of like, there should be these private money systems that try all of these various experiments, and the best one will win out. This is why it drives me crazy, by the way, when you have somebody who's maybe a Bitcoin maximalist who says things like, Ether and Ethereum based money systems, that's all fiat, right? Like that's not Austrian at all. Like hard money, fixed supply is the only way to go. I'm like, Ethereum's trying a massive amount of Austrian hard money experiments that don't have human discretion. Like go look at RAI. Which brings me to maybe in our education series here to get a grounding, the last bucket here, which is trusted versus trustless stablecoins. And I think this is an important one because in order to be on the more trustless side of the spectrum, and guys, it is a spectrum here. There's nothing that humanity has ever created or can create that is 100% trustless. But the more trustless it is, the more self-sovereign a money system can become. If you believe in the protocol sync thesis, as David and I do, then more trusted systems will sink to the bottom of this. But like trust can come about in the form of governance, as we just talked about, but also in the form of what collateral assets are backing the system. And this is what's kind of interesting. Here's another chart from Masari. I think, David, I see some of your handiwork in here from some triangles you put out on Bankless at one point in time. But so what we have here is a comparison of money systems, right? You've got the reserve asset at the bottom. And if we look at old analog systems, that used to be based on gold. And then dollars were really collateralized at one point in time before we went off the gold standard by that gold as a reserve store of value asset. And then kind of banking was built on top of that. And this is similar to what RAI is doing. Ether as I understand it, is the collateral for this. And why Ether? Maybe you'll tell us, but I think it's probably because it is the most trustless collateral source found on Ethereum. And then you could build a more stable currency on top of that collateral resource. And then, of course, we have DeFi that can be built on top of this and tap into this. Can you talk about that? Am I right that Ether is the form of collateral? And can you talk about why Ether?
That's right. So the main reason why we picked ETH is because it's simple. Like, it's the most trustless asset on Ethereum, and it's also simple to governance minimize the protocol in general when you just have Ether. Like, you don't have external trust assumptions like USDC, for example, or Wrap BTC. So you don't need to kind of fear that some other party can just take your collateral and the system breaks. And it's also, again, easy to governance minimize the protocol. So we can automate everything. We just have one collateral type. It's pretty easy to kind of put some smart contracts, put some code in place, make all the parameters kind of change themselves. And people just put ETH in the system and it just works. Like, that's where we want to get. That's the point where we want to get.
Why did Maker go in the direction of multi-collateral versus you guys are remaining in the direction of, is almost part of the original DAI, single collateral DAI version, which was just Ether? I mean, I think one of the reasons I've heard is so that they can have more economic bandwidth, let's call it, to increase the supply of DAI. Can you talk about maybe some trade-offs you guys are making there, why they went in this direction versus you?
That's right. So kind of ETH, the kind of total market cap of ETH is kind of the max kind of value that RAI can have. Like, ETH is kind of the economic bandwidth that's kind of limiting us. And we took this decision again because we want to governance minimize the protocol. We want to have at least one of these protocols that just doesn't depend on humans, even if it maybe remains a bit smaller than DAI or other systems. We can use it and we don't need to trust like some other third party and we don't need to think that the system breaks. So we just want to have like one of these experiments that just works and it doesn't depend on anyone else.
So just to drive this point home, RAI has committed to not ever including any other collateral other than Ether into its collateral type, because the introduction of other collateral would necessitate the requirement of actually voting that collateral in, one, and also trusting the issuer of that other asset. When Ethereum was born in the first block, and then also the next like 10,000 blocks, there was only one asset, and that one asset was Ether. There were no other assets. Other assets came to Ethereum because humans issued those assets. Those assets can't be used as collateral inside of RAI because, one, it would have to be human determined to be included, and also it would be a trust mechanism on those other collateral. So RAI will only ever be collateralized by Ether ever, due to the nature of Ether as the primary asset of Ethereum.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So it's, again, this system should be simple so we can governance minimize it, and it should be trustless. So these are the goals. We took this decision because we want to fulfill these two.
The math here is pretty simple here, guys, too, as far as like we've called Ether a trustless source, a source of trustless economic bandwidth in the past. And so if Ether's total market cap is like 1.45 trillion at some point in the future, that means RAI can at maximum be like close to $1 trillion. It can't be beyond that because it's using Ether as its source of collateral. So that's kind of the constraint that you were talking about. Of course, that's less of a constraint if Ether is 10 trillion, 20 trillion, $30 trillion, right? So there's a little bit of a bull case assumption for people valuing trustless collateral and trustless economic bandwidth that is part of the DAI case here. David, I want you to maybe introduce kind of your question here, because I saw you tweet this out a couple of weeks ago about the semantic definition and the difference between crypto dollars and stablecoins, because crypto dollars is also a term the industry uses. Maybe you can explain that and introduce that.
Right. I saw Stefan tweet out, I think perhaps out of frustration that people kept on calling RAI a stable coin when he's like, no, RAI is not a stable coin. Because people, when they say stable coins, they're talking about on-chain dollars, right? in my mind, the right, and this is just a semantics conversation. This is like, what words do we use to describe these things? In my mind, if we're going to use the term for tokens that are redeemable for $1 or worth $1 on Ethereum, we should call them dollars, especially USDC. Let's just call those dollars, because it's not like when I have dollars in my Wells Fargo bank account, I call them Wells Fargo dollars, even though that's what they are. They are a claim on dollars that is provided to me by Wells Fargo. USDC is a claim on dollars provided by Circle. USDC is just a dollar. If we want to get more specific, we can call it a crypto dollar. Stablecoins don't have the term dollar in them. And so stablecoins to me, as a word, are illustrative of a coin, a token that is stable. And if it was a dollar, we would call those a stable dollar coin or a crypto dollar or a dollar. But I think a stable coin leaves room for specifically something that is not a dollar. Because if it was a dollar, we would just use the term dollar. And so in my mind, RAI is actually the only stable coin on Ethereum. Stefan, how do you feel about this take?
That's pretty much correct. Again, I'm generally when I explain something, I'm trying not to fight people. Like they have like a certain framework that they use to think about things, and I'm like,
Sure.
okay, you can use that framework. I'm trying to kind of build a new one. But that's kind of right. A couple of years ago, like even before DAI was released, stablecoin was meant to mean low volatility or dampened volatility compared to Ether or compared to anything that you can think of. So RAI is kind of, at least to my knowledge, the only stablecoin for now on Ethereum.
I think
And also,
David,
importantly, the calling crypto dollars stablecoins gives too much to what the dollar is. Because the dollar is perhaps actually not all that stable, because it loses value every single year. And perhaps it doesn't lose that much value. But the reason why people assume the dollar is stable is because we don't have any other frame of reference for it. Stability is always a referential thing. It's always relative. You can't have stability in one asset without comparing it to another asset. And so now that we have something like RAI, maybe we'll actually be able to chart the value of dollars versus RAI, and we'll find out that RAI is actually a better storehold of wealth over time, perhaps making it a better stablecoin than a dollar.
Right. For now, so right now we're still at the beginning. The system is still kind of tried out. It's still kind of a demo and it's still an experiment. And I would say that RAI for now is kind of devaluing faster than the dollar. People are still learning about the system and they don't really know how to interact with it. But I guess, yeah, we will see how RAI will behave in 1 or 2, 5 years from now.
David, just for what it's worth, man, I'm on your team on this one. Like, I definitely believe the term stablecoin is more accurate for something like RAI and is not accurate for something like USDC. Those are more crypto dollars. However, if we're going to kind of push that narrative forward, even if it's the true narrative, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, my friend, because the whole industry just buckets all of it and calls it all stablecoins. And there's not, unless you're deep down the rabbit hole, I don't think the average user knows the difference between using USDC versus DAI versus RAI and the different trust assumptions that you're taking on there. But it's definitely a narrative battle. I'm happy to fight.
Yeah,
we'll
no,
see if we make any progress.
This is 100% a semantics conversation. And Stefan, as the CEO of a brand new DeFi app, I can totally understand why you are not interested in fighting that fight. However, we will fight that fight. We will fight that fight for you. That's what Bankless does.
Well, the way Stefan can help really is like, or RAI can help, is get on the radar, right? Is like, be successful. That's what will really turn the conversation. So can we talk about that, Stefan? Is like, so how many weeks or months are you guys from launch to mainnet at this point in time?
About 2 months. We're close. So on 17th this month, we will have 2 months since we launched.
Okay.
So it's not a ton of time.
So 2 months in, let's talk about this a little bit. First, so post-launch, how has RAI maintained stability? What were kind of some of your expectations, and how has it actually gone? And while you talk, I might bring up CoinGecko to sort of, folks on YouTube can see this on the charts, but how has it done as far as stability maintenance?
So in the beginning, for a couple of weeks, actually in the first month, RAI traded way above kind of its moving peg for a long time. there was kind of a ton of demand because we had some incentives in the system that made people just trade RAI way above the moving peg. Now it's a bit more stable. So it managed, like after 1 month, it managed to go below the moving peg, and then the moving peg started to go up. Because up until that point, it just went down, down, down because RAI was devaluing itself. And now it's starting to go up again. So we kind of expect in the long run, we hope and we expect to see RAI kind of just oscillating around that moving peg and not just continuously devaluing itself.
So what is that moving peg then? Is that the pi $3.14?
So that was the initial
Yep.
moving peg, and now it's around 3.02 because we were also kind of tuning the smart contract that's in charge with kind of changing the moving peg inside the system. And now kind of it's tuned, but we're still waiting on the market to kind of learn about RAI and learn how it works. So right now it's about $3.02.
How has that performed versus your hopes or expectations?
It's pretty much in line with them. I was expecting people to trade way above the moving peg and RAI devaluing itself. I think we will still see a couple of weeks of that, if not a couple of months. But at some point, we hope, like by pushing, kind of educating our community, we hope to see kind of RAI stabilizing itself a bit more.
So, Stefan, I actually started tinkering with this around launch, a couple days after launch. And as Bankless listeners might know, I'm really bullish on Ether. And so I put some Ether into Reflexer, and I borrowed some RAI, and then I sold RAI into Uniswap for more Ether. And then I put that Ether back into Reflexer. And so not only was that good because Ether price went up, and I got more Ether, but also RAI has gone down in price. So my collateral that I leveraged up, which is not financial advice, don't do that unless you know what you're doing, that went up, and then what I owe went down. And so when I finally repay my RAI, I'm gonna have to buy that off the secondary market and then go back to Reflexer and burn it, and then I can get my ETH back. So yeah, pat myself on the back. That was a good move. Let's talk about these market forces, market dynamics. Why did you suspect that RAI would devalue itself initially? Why was that your assumption? Is it because of degens like me?
Yes, and also generally you can see kind of dollar coins, peg coins trading slightly above the peg, kind of for long periods of time. So we were kind of expecting, especially in the beginning, RAI to devalue itself in order to kind of bring the market price down. This kind of, and also the fact that we have kind of an incentives campaign running that kind of messed a bit with how the system works. We kind of expected the system or RAI to go down in value, at least initially.
Okay, and so what do you expect to happen out in the long run? Do you expect it, like, let's go out 2 years. Let's go out the next 2 years. What would you expect RAI to do over that time frame? Or is that even a possible question to ask?
It's tough to say because the system is just meant to look at what the market does and then it reacts to the market. So if the market trades RAI at a premium, then RAI will go down. If it trades RAI at a discount, it will go up. So it's really hard to say, like in 2 years, what will happen. I would say that at least in next year, RAI might have a slight bias to go down because again, there will be kind of adoption, might be demand, and people will trade RAI at a premium.
Okay, so if there is RAI demand, what is that going to do to the RAI price?
So if like the market price of RAI on Uniswap, for example, is above the target that we want, this target will start to go down because the system wants the market to bring the market price down and close to the target, even kind of below the target. So kind of there's kind of we saw that in our models when we kind of simulated RAI. We saw that if there is kind of a continuous premium on the market price, RAI will just probably reprice itself to zero, which is like not that good. So we have some ideas now to kind of tinker with the controller and make it work, even if there's kind of a constant premium for a long period of time. But that's kind of what you can expect. So if we don't do, like, we will change some things, but if we don't do something now, you will kind of see a slight bias to go down in terms of kind of RAI value.
So the way Amin shows this or describes this as kind of like as a spring, right? It kind of like oscillates back and forth. But the goal of the spring, the controller, as you mentioned, is to restore and return RAI to some equilibrium point.
Right. Right. The idea is that in RAI's case, there's not a fixed equilibrium. Like the target changes. It's not like fixed to $1 or to something. The target itself changes instead of doing something else to bring the market price to a target.
And what determines what that target is? I think you mentioned this earlier, but that's always the part that gets people hung up, and including me.
The system itself. So we just said in the beginning, like RAI is this, like it's 3.14 bucks inside the protocol. And from that point on, just the controller or like, yeah, the smart contract that changes the moving peg just did its job and changed the moving peg down because it wanted people to just sell RAI and bring the market price back down to the moving peg.
And what are the inputs to that system?
So kind of the controller, the PID controller kind of has three terms. It has P, I, and D. P is the proportional, so it kind of takes into account the current difference between the market price of RAI and the target that we want for RAI. The integral kind of sums the error that kind of over, let's say, 24 hours, all the errors that we saw kind of between market and target price. And it kind of sums all of these, and then it sums the I term with the P term. And then it kind of spits out the result. And that result is kind of the pace at which the moving peg changes in the protocol. And that basically the market kind of affects what that pace is and how the moving peg changes. Like if Amin likes to use this example, if Joe Lubin comes tomorrow and puts like 10 billion in ETH in the system, he can crash the protocol, and then the moving peg will quickly start to go up because it wants people to buy RAI and bring the market price back up. So in a way, kind of the market decides.
Is it something like a trailing average of RAI price? Is that kind of the net effect of this, or is that not accurate?
Not really. Like
Okay.
you can think of that in terms of the integral term, but it's not really a trailing.
Okay.
It's not. It just is. So the price just is, and then at every couple of hours, the system says, okay, the market price is this. I want this to happen, so I will make the moving peg now go that way, and that's it. Like it just is.
And is there an oracle in this system coming from the Uniswap trading pair?
Yeah. So we have we use Chainlink for ETH USD for now, and we use Uniswap V2, our pool, to get the RAI ETH price, and then using Chainlink we get the RAI USD, and then that goes in the controller.
Did I notice a hint of wishing for better oracles in that comment? Yeah, perhaps talk about that.
We love Chainlink. Like it was really easy to use them. We still want to use something that doesn't really need human management. So ideally, also another Uniswap pool that just takes the ETH price, and we use that in the system.
Do you think that's coming?
Hopefully, yes, especially with Uniswap V3. So hopefully, yeah.
What's so interesting about this from a high level, right, is we've had kind of like David used this term money gods, right, which is really the math or the code, the protocol behind the force of money, right? So most famously, the trust in code for Bitcoin is there shall be 21 million and fixed supply, and we cut it in half every 4 years. The trust in code for something like RAI is you have ETH, and then it's this PID. That's the code. This spring mechanism behind the system is the thing that you're trusting in, and that is all written in smart contract code on Ethereum. So it is also equally immutable as the entire Ethereum platform. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. So many people ask like, but why not put more collateral types in RAI? And I'm like, well, we can have RAI, and then we can have other systems like RAI, which would be great. So like nothing stops us from experimenting a bit more with money gods.
Okay, very cool. We're going to get back to this conversation with Stefan. I know David and I have dominated. I've just got a couple more questions about how Rye has done since launch, and then we're going to get into some of the listener questions, and maybe we'll get some spicy takes from you, Stefan, about some of the other algo coins that are out there and recent events. But before we do that, we want to thank the sponsors that made this episode possible.
Synthetics is Ethereum's decentralized derivatives liquidity protocol. What does that mean? Synthetics is a platform for creating and trading synthetic assets, which are assets that are priced via an oracle rather than bids or asks. Traders can use the KWENTA exchange, which hosts and trades all of the synthetic assets created by Synthetics. Traders on KWENTA can trade synthetic tokens like SBTC, SOIL, or SDEFI. Because KWENTA is powered by Synthetics, traders experience zero slippage on their trades. No, I didn't mean low slippage. I meant no slippage, because that is the power of the Synthetics platform. No slippage on your trades. You can also easily short assets with iSynths, which are synthetic assets that move inversely to their target asset. Synthetics isn't just for traders. Developers can build on Synthetics to access the infinite liquidity offered by synthetic assets, or investors can stake collateral to the protocol and earn fees that the protocol collects. If you're a trader and you're looking for a trading platform not found in the legacy world, check out KWENTA.io. If you're a developer or you just want to earn yield on your collateral, go to www.synthetics.io, where you can stake your SNX or ETH and earn fees from Synthetics. Gemini is the world's most trusted cryptocurrency exchange. I've been a customer of Gemini since I first got into crypto in 2017, and it's been my main exchange of choice to make my crypto buys and sells. Gemini is available in all 50 states and in over 50 countries worldwide, and on Gemini there are markets for over 30 various different crypto assets, including many of the hot DeFi tokens, and it's one of the few exchanges that has liquid DAI markets. Gemini just launched their Earn program, where you can earn up to 7.4% interest on 26 various crypto assets. If you're tired of paying fees in DeFi, or you don't want to worry about DeFi exploits, but you still want to earn interest on your crypto assets, Gemini Earn is the product for you. Another product I'm stoked to get my hands on is the Gemini Crypto Back Credit Card, which gives you 3% cash back on all of your purchases, but paid to you in your preferred crypto asset. When I get my Gemini credit card, I'm going to make sure that I get my cash back in ETH. So whenever I buy something, I get a little bit of ETH bonus back to me at the same time. You can open up a free account in under 3 minutes at gemini.com/gobankless. And if you trade more than $100 within the first 30 days after sign up, you'll be gifted a free $15 Bitcoin bonus. Check them out at gemini.com/gobankless.
So, Stefan, we talked about the one measure of success of Rye as being the price stability of Rye as a unit. Right now, I'm showing a dashboard that is on the reflexer.finance website, because I want to ask you about another success criteria of an aspiring stablecoin, and that is total supply. How many units are out there right now? So how many units of Rye are out there right now? What is the market cap of Rye? And is that meeting your expectations so far?
So the market cap is around $100 million right now. The supply kind of floats between 32 and 34 million Rye. It's pretty much in line with what I expected. We actually expected a bit less, simply because people don't yet understand Rye. So it's going pretty well up until this. It's been pretty well.
Mentally, I mentally for a second there, that math didn't check out to me. But then, of course, I remembered that Rye is, of course, worth $3,
Yep.
right, and not $1. So that math checks out now. Let's talk about another, I guess, area of the success of a stablecoin. That is what it's being used for. Ultimately, a stablecoin has to ascend through a, I guess, monetization path. Maybe the first step, some would say, is being used as a collateral source for other assets, maybe a collateral source in DeFi. But eventually, you got to start on being used as a medium of exchange and a unit of account, and that can happen sporadically and in all sorts of different ways, as we've seen with Bitcoin and Ether so far and other stable coins. Where are you seeing the use cases for Rye right now, and where do you expect to see them in the future?
Right now, I would say use cases are pretty much DeFi centric. So kind of money markets, derivatives, so that kind of stuff. Actually, RAI can be used in two money markets right now, and we will have a third one by the end of the month. So we have like money markets on Cream and on Fuse. And we're also working with a couple of people, for example, to add RAI as a collateral type in projects like UMA and other synthetic platforms that will probably come in next months.
So what's the plan to grow? This is a question from actually someone else on the Bankless team, our editor. What's the question to grow from 100 million where you are today, which is not too shabby, by the way, in the not too distant past. That was where DAI was. In fact, I think, David, if I'm remembering correctly, when we had Mariano on, it was like around 100 million or so. That was in 2020, so sort of mid 2020. You guys are already there. What's the plan to get to 1 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion?
Right. I think it's mainly use cases. So as you said, RAI needs to become a medium of exchange on Ethereum. So people need to use it for something more than just DeFi. They need to use it for payroll. They need to use it for bounties. So I would say kind of implanting the idea of RAI as money is important for kind of RAI to grow.
So this brings me to a question from one of our listeners, came in from the Discord, Iggy. Does Reflex Labs have a token yet? And like, of course, we're talking about RAI as a token, a monetary token. Is there a token associated with Reflexer Labs? And if yes, what does that do?
Yeah, so we plan to have a token. Tomorrow, we will actually have the first Genesis community distribution for that token. The idea is that the token is very similar to MKR in a way, because the protocol RAI is very similar to DAI. The token will act mainly as a backstop for the system. So we will protect the system. It will kind of insure the system against a black swan event, for example. And in the long run, even if like RAI is meant to be governance minimized, like very few components will be governed by humans. There will be some things like oracles, for example, that need to be upgraded in the long run, and people can vote on those upgrades using the token.
And then is it also theoretically possible to vote out governance, like where like, oh, you know, we've upgraded to Uniswap v3, there's liquidity on Uniswap v3, we don't really see any viable like upgrade paths ahead of us, which means that the only viable upgrade path after that is to vote to have no more votes ever. Is that something that you guys consider?
That's what we want to do. Although the idea is that like we remove control, we remove most of the control. We kind of show the community that we're very serious about not having humans in the protocol, and then we hope that the community will just take kind of will take our kind of position, and they will vote most of the other remaining control out, if possible. If not, they need to decide.
Right. So it's a governance minimization process, and hopefully it ends at, you know, zero governance. But there's more to the token as well. You talked about it's a backstop for the system. So let's talk about that for a little bit. But maybe let's also talk about the way that the system as a whole captures value and the relationship of the FLX token in that scenario.
Right. So again, FLX is very similar to MKR. It has kind of exactly the same mechanism for now. There is kind of a stability fee inside the protocol. People need to pay that stability fee when they mint RAI. These stability fees accrue in the protocol's balance sheet. And kind of after a certain point, the system itself will try to auction a portion of the stability fees in exchange for FLX tokens. And then these tokens are automatically burned.
For the FLX token itself, is there any sort of incentive system that you guys have going? Any kind of liquidity mining? What does that look like?
Most of our campaigns and rewards right now are focused on kind of growing RAI, so having liquidity to make sure that Uniswap pool is liquid, that the price feed cannot be manipulated easily. We don't really have any plans for FLX. We kind of focus on growing the protocol, making sure RAI is healthy, and then we will see if something else comes up.
Very cool. Here's a question from Bankless listener Above Average Joe. Is Float on your radar? And if so, how would you compare their plan against RAI? And I've got to be honest, I actually don't know what Float is. Maybe you do, Stefan.
Yeah, it's another kind of attempt or design at creating a non-peg stable asset. I don't think it's live yet. I just heard about the protocol. I didn't really check it. I think they wrote an article about them and us and comparing us, but I didn't really check them in depth.
Can we talk about that as a category? Because we're in kind of recent news, Faye has been a attempt at a crypto dollar, maybe
Right.
using our terminology, that is uncollateralized and that has recently come on the scene with a massive amount of market value at the very beginning. It's been a little bit shaky since that. What's your take on Faye and similar designs?
I would maybe just comment about mechanism design in general. So I don't think a mechanism should force the market to do something. I think the market should be allowed to do anything. The mechanism should adapt to what the market does, not the other way around. So I think people who anyone who builds a protocol or a mechanism should take that into account.
And is that something that they didn't do? I haven't been tracking Faye myself to the nth degree, but it seemed that there were a lot of kind of non-mechanism human intervention sorts of decisions that were involved and are continuing to be involved to get it back to stability what it needs to be. Is that sort of what you're commenting on?
Yes, yes. I didn't really analyze their mechanism kind of in detail. I just know that they probably need to pivot right now. I think that's what the team is doing, and I hope that they manage to bring Faye back to $1 with
What
a
are
new
some
system.
Do you think maybe this is a philosophical question, but do you think uncollateralized stablecoins can ever be, or crypto dollars can ever be successful, or are they fundamentally flawed?
We have an example, a model. There's kind of an asset called Frax that's right now backed mostly by USDC, but their collateralization ratio is on average below 100%. And they managed to kind of make that work up until this point, and it's working pretty well. Um, I think people might manage to build something that's maybe below 100%, but in general, I don't really see these mechanisms kind of long lasting. In general, I kind of think over collateralization is the security buffer that every stable asset needs to have.
So Frax, to your point, that's kind of a hybrid, right? It's not completely
Yeah, it's a hybrid.
uncollateralized.
Yeah.
What other stablecoin designs are out there that you do actually like?
I mean, DAI, of course, because we took inspiration from them. I just hope they would at some point maybe take the same decision that we took and they detach from the dollar and have negative rates.
Do you know what? It's like I actually like I get where you're coming from, and there's an element of me that hopes for that, but there's also an element of like I'm glad that experiment is running on the side, and that Rye has its own experiment, and that both of those experiments can come to fruition. We get to see what the best experiment actually was. I feel like that adds some additional resiliency to all of Ethereum's monetary experiments. But I get what you're saying. I've got another question coming in from the Discord about plans to migrate Rye to Ethereum layer 2. What are plans there?
So we cannot really migrate the protocol itself. Like smart contracts are already deployed. We cannot really migrate all the ether that's in the protocol. We can instead bring Rye to L2, for example, on Loopring or some other chain, side chain or L2 where it can be traded or used in DeFi. And that I think that's the long-term plan.
And the Rye system, the protocol has to actually stay on the L1 to maintain that governance minimization. Because L2s don't have the same level of trust assurances that the L1 does. Rye can go anywhere, but the Rye credit facility, the actual protocol, the actual application, that has to stay on L1, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. So we need Rye to live in Manhattan, and then it can kind of go and take a trip on other streets or cities or whatever. So yeah, that's the idea.
Love that Manhattan analogy. Stefan, for folks that have been intrigued by this entire conversation in the Bankless Nation and they're looking to kind of get involved in what Reflexer and what Rye is up to, how can they get involved?
I think the best way is to check our Twitter. So we are at Reflexer Finance, and we also have links to our Discord there and our website.
And that will be in the show notes as well.
Guys, of course, if you are a degen like my co-host David Hoffman here, you can also experiment with going margin long on your ETH using the RAI platform. There's definitely some alpha to earn if you do it well. But of course, risks and disclaimers. As I say that, ETH is risky, so is margin, so is crypto in general. In fact, all of DeFi is risky. You could lose what you put in. We're headed
is
west, though.
Risky, and ETH on margin is even riskier.
Thanks, David. I feel like you said that for yourself too. But we are headed west. This is the frontier. It's not for everyone, but thanks so much for joining us on the Bankless journey.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stefan. Hey, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, head over to Bankless HQ right now to develop your crypto investing skills and learn how to free yourself from banks and gain your financial independence. We recommend joining our daily newsletter, podcast, and community as a Bankless Premium subscriber to get the most out of your Bankless experience. You'll get access to our market analysis, our alpha leaks, and exclusive content, and even the Bankless token for airdrops, raffles, and unlocks. If you're interested in crypto, the Bankless community is where you want to be. Click the link in the description to become a Bankless Premium subscriber today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for in-depth interviews with industry leaders, Ask Me Anythings, and weekly roll-ups where we summarize the week in crypto and other fantastic content. Thanks everyone for watching and being on the journey as